I see you there, sitting in the silence of those hours when it feels like something important is slipping through your fingers. That moment when you look in the mirror and don't fully recognize who you're looking back at. I know that feeling of strangeness well, as if a part of you is slipping away, leaving an empty space that you don't know exactly how to fill. It's like waking up from a dream that you can't fully remember, but which has left a deep mark on you. We all go through those moments when we feel we're not who we used to be. Perhaps you realized this when you bumped into an old friend and the conversation didn't flow like it used to. Or when you opened that box of memories and wondered who that person was in the old photographs. The clothes you loved no longer suit you. The places you used to go no longer arouse the same enthusiasm. The words that come out of your mouth sometimes seem to belong to someone else. That feeling of losing something of yourself can be frightening, can't it? It's as if the ground is shifting beneath your feet, and what you've always considered to be me is turning into something unrecognizable. You wonder if you're betraying your true self or if you're just changing naturally. We often cling to versions of ourselves that have already played their part, like old clothes that no longer fit but that we can't give away. I know that insistent voice that whispers in the middle of the night, "Who am I now? Where has that person I used to be gone?" It's that feeling of mourning for parts of you that are saying goodbye, even when you don't consciously realize it. The small deaths we face while we're still alive are perhaps the hardest to recognize and accept. You may feel like you're betraying yourself by letting go of aspects that have defined who you are for so long. I remember when I realized that I no longer cared about things that once seemed essential to my identity. Hobbies that I abandoned, friendships that dissolved naturally, beliefs that no longer made sense. At first, I felt guilty for changing, as if I were committing a kind of betrayal against myself. Have you ever felt like that? That feeling that you're leaving behind a version of yourself that you promised never to abandon? The people around you may not understand this process. Some may even say, "You've changed," and not necessarily as a compliment. Because people get used to who we are, and when we change, it forces them to adjust their image of us. This can generate resistance not only within yourself, but also in the circles in which you live. It's as if there's an invisible contract that you're breaking by letting parts of yourself die naturally. Have you noticed how we often confuse our identity with our roles and functions? We are parents, children, professionals, partners, friends. And when one of these roles changes or ends, we feel lost, as if we've lost ourselves too. The promotion that didn't come, the relationship that ended, the children who grew up and left home. All these transitions can leave us feeling like we're losing important pieces of who we are. There is a sadness in this process that is rarely recognized. A kind of silent mourning that has no rituals or ceremonies. No one brings flowers or offers condolences when you stop being who you were before. It's a solitary journey, this continuous dying and rebirth that happens while we continue to live our daily routine. You wash the dishes, drive to work, smile at social gatherings, while internally parts of you are saying goodbye. The modern world makes this process even more confusing. We are constantly bombarded with messages suggesting that we should remain the same, firm in our convictions and characteristics. Consistency is valued above transformation. Social networks create digital profiles that seem frozen in time, while we humans are constantly changing. Sometimes even your digital memories seem to confront you with who you once were. Transitions between life stages are rarely smooth or clearly defined. They're more like dawn. You can't pinpoint the exact moment when night turned into day, but at some point you realize that the darkness is behind you. Such are the changes in our identity. Imperceptible in everyday life, but profound when we look back and see how far we've come. Although you can't pinpoint the exact moment, one day you realize that you are no longer the same person. What few realize is that this apparent dying of parts of you is not a failure or an irreparable loss. It's a natural and necessary process. Just as a tree can't grow without shedding its old leaves, you can't evolve without letting go of aspects that have already fulfilled their purpose in your life. Each version of you has served a specific purpose, taught particular lessons, and now some of them need to make way for new expressions of who you are. This feeling of drifting between who you were and who you are becoming is perfectly normal, although we rarely talk about it. It's like being in a corridor between two rooms. You've left one space, but you're not yet completely settled in the next. In this gap, there is a special vulnerability, but also a rare opportunity. It's precisely in this in-between space that new possibilities begin to emerge, like seeds that need darkness before they can seek the light. Watch a tree for a whole year and you'll witness one of the greatest lessons about transformation. In autumn, the once vital leaves become a burden. The tree doesn't cling to them for fear of becoming naked during the winter. It lets them go, one by one, without resistance. There is no waste in this process. Those same leaves nourish the soil that feeds its roots. What looks like death is actually just a preparation for the rebirth of spring. Our identity works in a similar way, even when we can't see the full cycle. Have you ever noticed how a house that isn't cleaned regularly becomes suffocated by the objects we accumulate? The full cupboards, the drawers that barely close, the surfaces covered in things that were once useful but now just take up space. Our identity also accumulates characteristics, habits, and beliefs. Some still serve us, others just take up space in our being. The difficulty is discerning which is which. That rigidity that was once determination. That fear that was once prudence. That behavior that was once protection. Think of how you learned to ride a bike. At first, those extra wheels are essential. Without them, you'd fall straight off. But there comes a time when those same wheels, which once guaranteed your safety, become an impediment to your progress. If you keep them on forever, you'll never experience the true freedom of balancing on two wheels. Many aspects of our identity are like these wheels, fundamental at a certain stage, but limiting if we can't let go of them when the time comes. The caterpillar doesn't see transformation as a loss of identity. It can't resist the metamorphosis, thinking, but I like being a caterpillar so much. I have so many legs. How can I live with only 6? For her, the cocoon is not a tomb, but a portal. During this process, her body literally dissolves before reconfiguring itself into something completely new. There are periods in our lives that function like this cocoon, moments of necessary dissolution before we can reconfigure ourselves into something more expanded. In the kitchen, we learn that certain ingredients need to be transformed in order to release their true flavor. Garlic, when whole, has a discrete, closed-in flavor. But when you mash, crush or chop it, it releases compounds that completely transform its flavor profile. The disruption of its original structure is exactly what allows its essence to manifest itself fully. Sometimes we need to allow structures of our identity to be crushed so that our essence can express itself more fully. The seasons don't negotiate with each other. Winter doesn't ask autumn for permission to arrive, nor does it promise when it will leave. It simply arrives, does its necessary work and, when finished, gives way to spring. Within you, the seasons of your identity also follow a rhythm that cannot always be controlled. Resisting this natural flow is like fighting with the wind, a waste of energy that could be directed towards navigating with these currents instead of fighting against them. Look at water and see how it exists in different states, liquid, solid, gaseous, without ever ceasing to be water. Its fundamental essence remains unchanged, even when its form and behavior change drastically. You also have an essence that remains constant, even when your thoughts, behavior, and even values evolve. This essential core is not threatened by the process of transformation. On the contrary, it finally finds new forms of expression when we let go of what no longer serves us. Indigenous tribes traditionally see rites of passage as sacred moments where one version of a person must symbolically die, so that another can be born. They know that this symbolic death is not something to be feared or avoided, but honored and celebrated. In our modern society, we have lost these rituals that help us mark these transitions. Without them, we become confused, not understanding that the discomfort we feel is just the natural friction of a birth, not a sign that something is wrong. No seed can become what it is destined to be while clinging to its protective shell. The shell that once protected it eventually becomes its prison. In order to germinate, the seed needs to allow this protection to break down and crumble. The same happens with the protections we build around our identity. Those defenses, beliefs, and behaviors that were once vital to our survival can, over time, prevent us from flourishing. What once protected now confines. When you look in the mirror, you only see the surface of the present moment. But you are actually like a river, apparently the same, but constantly renewed. Scientists say that, at a cellular level, you are not the same person you were 7 years ago. Every cell has been replaced, every atom renewed. You keep the same shape, the same name, the same memories, but physically you are an entirely new person. So why are we so resistant to the idea of renewal in our psychological and emotional identity? Ancient blacksmiths knew that to strengthen metal, you first had to put it in the fire, making it malleable, almost liquid, before reinforcing it into something stronger and more useful. Metal that never goes into the fire remains as it was extracted from the earth, full of impurities and relatively fragile. The periods of dissolution in our lives, when parts of our identity are melting, are like this purifying fire. They are uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but absolutely necessary for our strengthening and refinement. The violinist knows that the strings of his instrument need to have just the right tension, neither too loose nor too taut. Too loose, and they don't produce music. Too tense, and they can break. In the same way, there is a creative tension between preserving who we are and allowing ourselves to be transformed. Too rigid, and we become stagnant. Too much change without anchoring, and we can lose our center. The wisdom lies in finding that balance where we can be both stable and fluid, consistent and adaptable. When observing a forest after a fire, biologists notice something surprising. Certain species of plants only germinate after their seeds are exposed to the extreme heat of the fire. What appears to be pure destruction is actually a necessary catalyst for new life. In our personal journey, periods of crisis or loss, a divorce, the loss of a job, the end of a cherished dream, can act as this purifying fire, activating seeds of potential that could not germinate under normal conditions. What seems like the end is often just the beginning of something we couldn't even imagine before. The problem isn't that something in you is dying, it's that you've been taught to fear this death, to fight it with all your might. This resistance is what causes much of the suffering. It's like swimming against the current instead of allowing it to carry you where you need to go. When you fight against the natural process of transformation, you waste precious energy trying to preserve what has already completed its cycle. This energy could be directed towards nurturing what is being born in you, but it gets trapped in a battle that can't be won. There is a deep wisdom in recognizing which parts of you are ready to be released. It's not something you decide intellectually, it's something you feel in your gut. That feeling of heaviness when you try to maintain behaviors that no longer resonate with you. The increasing effort to sustain relationships that have already fulfilled their purpose. The exhaustion of trying to believe in ideas that no longer make sense to your soul. Your body and emotions are precise compasses that point to what needs to be released, if you're willing to listen to them. The fear of letting go of parts of yourself often comes from a misconception about identity. We think of our identity as something solid and fixed, like a marble sculpture that, once formed, must be protected from any alteration. But your identity is more like a garden, a living ecosystem that needs regular pruning, weeding and planting of new seeds to remain vibrant. Without this constant cycle of releasing and renewing, the garden becomes suffocated, unable to express its full beauty. The pain of letting go of parts of yourself is real and deserves to be honored. It is a genuine grief, no less significant for being invisible to others. When you abandon a belief that has sustained you for decades, when you renounce a role that has defined your identity for years, when you let go of a way of being that was familiar and comfortable, there is a real loss. Allowing yourself to feel this sadness isn't weakness, it's courage. It's recognizing the depth of your human experience and the significance of what is being transformed in you. Life is constantly inviting us to evolve through detachment. Children grow up and leave, relationships transform, careers change direction, our health and physical capabilities alter. Each of these changes asks us to review who we think we are. The static identity we try to preserve is like a photograph, a frozen representation of a moment that has passed. Real life, on the other hand, is a constantly unfolding film, with scenes that continually surprise us and invite us into new ways of being. Transformation rarely happens all at once. It's more common for it to occur in layers, like the gradual undoing of a complex knot. You may find the same lesson returning in different forms over the years, each time offering a deeper opportunity for release. That pattern you thought you had overcome years ago may reappear in a new situation, not as a punishment, but as an invitation to an even more complete liberation. The cycles of transformation are spirals, not circles. you return to similar points, but always at a different level of understanding. True freedom begins when you stop identifying so rigidly with your thoughts, emotions, and personal stories. Notice how we often say, I am my work, I am my pain, I am my story. This little verb, to be, creates a subtle but powerful prison. What if, instead, you could say, I am experiencing this emotion, or I am temporarily playing this role? This small change in language opens up space for you to exist beyond the limitations of any temporary identity. You are the sky. Your thoughts and emotions are just passing clouds. Each version of you that dies releases energy and space for something new to be born. It's a basic law of physics and spirituality. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed. When you let go of an aspect of your identity that no longer serves you, that energy doesn't disappear. It becomes available to fuel your next chapter. Many people report feeling an explosion of creativity, clarity, or purpose after periods of great detachment. It's like cleaning a dusty window. The light has always been there, but now it can enter unobstructed. The defense mechanisms we developed in childhood were necessary strategies for our emotional survival. That social mask we learned to wear, that toughness we adopted so as not to show vulnerability, that perfectionism that protected us from criticism, they all served a purpose. But now, as adults in different circumstances, many of these defenses limit us more than they protect us. They're like a winter coat worn on a summer's day. What once prevented freezing now causes overheating. Recognizing and gradually dismantling these defenses is an essential part of the growth process. Modern culture teaches us to seek constant addition, more knowledge, more experiences, more possessions, more connections. Rarely are we encouraged to practice subtraction, the art of having less. But it's precisely in the empty space that the magic happens. Musicians know that it's the silences between the notes that create the melody. Painters recognize that it is the empty space of the canvas that gives meaning to the brushstrokes. In the same way, it is in the space created by detachment that your true essence is free to express itself. It's no coincidence that so many spiritual traditions emphasize practices of simplification and emptying. There is a crucial difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up comes from a place of defeat. Letting go comes from a place of wisdom. Giving up is abandoning something that still resonates with your soul because the path seems difficult. Letting go is recognizing when something has completed its natural cycle in your life. The key to discerning between the two lies in your motivation. Are you walking away out of fear and exhaustion, or because you feel internally that this chapter is complete? The truth is that some doors need to close so that others can open. Some bridges need to be burnt not out of anger, but to prevent you from continuing to return to territory that no longer belongs to your journey. The ancient alchemists understood that transformation involves stages of dissolution, separation, and reintegration. First, what was solid must become fluid. Then, the essential must be separated from the non-essential. Finally, a new integration takes place at a higher level. This process is neither linear nor comfortable, but it is how gold is refined. You are going through your own personal alchemy. What appears to be chaos and dissolution can actually be the beginning of a profound transmutation. Trust in the process, even when you can't clearly see the end result. Disorientation is often the first sign of a significant reorganization on a deeper level. The first step in working with this process of transformation is simply to recognize it. Give a name to what is happening in you. I'm in transition. Parts of me are dying while others are being born. By naming your experience, you begin to familiarize yourself with it instead of fearing it as an unknown intruder. This recognition is in itself a form of acceptance. You don't have to like or fully understand the process, just recognize its existence and legitimacy as a natural part of life. Detachment doesn't happen instantly. It's more like a slow thaw than a dramatic break. A simple but powerful practice is to identify an aspect of your identity that you feel is dissolving and give it a space to be honored before you leave. Write a letter of thanks to this part of yourself, acknowledging how it has served you and why it was important. This ritual of recognition helps transform what could be a traumatic separation into a conscious and meaningful transition. Your body carries the wisdom of these cycles of life and death in every cell. When you feel lost in the transformations of your identity, turn your attention to the breath, the most basic act of receiving and releasing. Breathe in and allow yourself to fully receive the present moment. Breathe out and deliberately practice letting go. This simple biological rhythm is a constant teacher of the natural flow of life. 5 minutes a day observing your breath can bring more clarity about the cycles of transformation than hours of mental analysis. Nature is full of metaphors for our internal processes. Find a natural element that symbolizes the stage of transformation you are experiencing. It could be a seed germinating, a snake changing its skin, a chrysalis, a tree in autumn, or any other symbol that resonates with you. Put an image of this symbol where you can see it every day. Let it constantly remind you that your experience, however uncomfortable, is part of a larger natural pattern that has been repeated countless times in the web of life. Our identities are largely formed through our relationships. When we are undergoing transformation, these relationships can both facilitate and hinder the process. Consciously observe which people in your life seem to understand and support your evolution, and which seem to resist it. This doesn't mean judging those who have difficulty with your change. They have their own reasons and journeys. But it does mean being strategic about who you share the most vulnerable parts of your transformation with. Look for those who can witness your process without trying to correct, accelerate, or interrupt it. An interesting paradox of identity transitions is that the more we try to define precisely who we are, the more difficult change becomes. Try temporarily letting go of the need to have a clear definition of yourself. When someone asks, "What do you do?" or "Who are you?" allow yourself to respond with something like, "I'm figuring that out now," or "I'm in a period of redefinition." These answers aren't evasive, they're deeply honest. They create space for you to exist in the gap between identities without the pressure of prematurely solidifying a new definition. Resistance to the process of transformation often comes from fear of the unknown. Our brain prefers familiar suffering to unfamiliar discomfort. To calm this natural fear, develop the habit of experimenting with new ways of being. It's not necessary to completely abandon an old identity all at once. You can briefly try out new behaviors, ideas, or expressions, like trying on new clothes without committing to buying them. These temporary experiments educate your nervous system, showing you that exploring new identities doesn't necessarily lead to the disaster that your fear anticipates. The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves have enormous power. When we're in the middle of an identity transition, it's useful to review and perhaps revise the narrative of our life. How would you tell your story in a way that honors both what is dying and what is being born? Instead of seeing your life as a straight line that has suddenly changed direction, perhaps you could see it as an evolving spiral, where each turn seemingly repeats previous themes, but always at a different level of understanding. This narrative redefinition can transform what appears to be rupture into deeper continuity. Silence is a powerful ally during periods of identity transformation. In our noisy, fast-paced culture, we rarely allow ourselves the space we need to listen to the whispers of our deepest being. Try dedicating some regular time, it can be as little as 15 minutes a few times a week, to simply sitting in silence, with no specific agenda other than witnessing what arises within you. This empty space is like a womb for your rebirth. In the silence, you can begin to distinguish between the superficial fears and habits that are dying and the deeper truth of your being that is emerging. When we let go of aspects of our identity, it's common to feel a temporary emptiness. This emptiness isn't necessarily negative, it's a space of possibilities, like a blank canvas waiting for the first stroke. However, our tendency is to immediately fill it with something new, anything to avoid the feeling of incompleteness. Resist this impulse. Learn to be comfortable with not knowing, with an identity that is not fully formed. This fertile emptiness is similar to a freshly plowed field. It looks empty, but it's full of potential, just waiting for the right moment to manifest new life. It's tempting to judge our transformation process, especially when it doesn't follow a straight line or a predictable timeline. We develop expectations, "I should be over this by now," or "someone stronger would have left this behind by now." These judgments only add unnecessary suffering. Transformation has its own time and rhythm, unique to each person and situation. There is no universal timetable for rebirth. Instead of measuring your progress against an external standard, ask yourself, am I being honest with myself about where I am in this process? Am I allowing it to develop organically, or am I trying to control it? Gratitude may sound like a cliche, but it is one of the most transformative practices available to us, especially during periods of identity change. It's not about forcing false positivity on painful situations. It's about recognizing that even the parts of you that are dying have contributed significantly to your journey. They have protected you, taught you, helped you survive and grow to this point. A daily practice of expressing specific gratitude for these parts, even as you let them go, transforms the process of letting go from an experience of loss to one of completeness and recognition. Gratitude honors the whole cycle, not just the beginning or the end. Finally, remember that this process of death and rebirth is neither linear nor does it have a definitive end point. There is no moment when you can say, okay, now I've completed my transformation and I can rest forever in my new identity. Life is a continuum of transformations, some subtle, others dramatic. By accepting this, you can relax into the realization that you don't have to get it right or complete the process, just participate in it consciously. This acceptance of the continuous flow is perhaps the greatest liberation of all. It's not about reaching a final destination, but about dancing gracefully with the constant transformations that are the very nature of life. If there's one thing I've learned from observing countless cycles of transformation in my own life and in the lives of others, it's that what seems to be our end often turns out to be our true beginning. That relationship that ended and seemed to be the death of your dreams has made way for a love that is more in line with who you really are. That job you lost and felt to be a complete failure has directed you towards a vocation that nourishes your soul in ways you could never have imagined. The belief you abandoned and feared was betraying your essence has actually freed you up for a more expansive understanding of yourself and the world. The resistance we feel during these transitional periods is a natural response from the ego, whose primary function is to keep things as they are. The ego is not your enemy, it's just doing its job of trying to protect you from changes perceived as threats. With kindness, you can recognize this protective mechanism while also affirming your greater capacity to evolve beyond these protections. It's like thanking the guard who has faithfully watched your door for years, while gently explaining that it's now safe to let new visitors in. The beauty of transformation cycles is that they carry their own intelligence. You don't need to plan or architect your rebirth, it's already inscribed in the fabric of your being, just as the shape of the oak tree potentially exists within the acorn. Your responsibility is not to create this potential, but to remove the obstacles that prevent its natural expression. When you let go of limiting identities, false commitments, outdated beliefs, you're not losing yourself, you're creating space to find yourself in true ways. Those who fear this process of death and rebirth often imagine that there are only two possibilities: to stick rigidly to who they were or to lose themselves completely in a formless void. But there is a third, much more nourishing alternative, a rooted flexibility. Imagine a tree with deep roots and flexible branches. The roots represent your core values, your deepest sense of purpose, the truths that stand the test of time. The branches represent the changing expressions of these values through different roles, relationships, and circumstances. The leaves may fall, the branches may be pruned, but the tree remains. Mystical traditions around the world recognize that there is something within us that witnesses all our transformations without being affected by them. Call it soul, consciousness, essential being, or any other name that resonates with you. This core presence is neither born nor dies, it neither gains nor loses, it neither increases nor decreases. It's like the space that contains all forms without being limited by them. During periods of intense transformation, you can discover this deepest dimension of your being, the one that remains constant even when everything else is changing. Compassion is perhaps the most powerful bond during these periods of dissolution and rebirth. Compassion towards yourself when you feel lost in the gap between identities. Compassion towards others who may not understand or support your transformation. Compassion even for the parts of you that stubbornly resist change. This open-hearted quality transforms what could be an experience of judgment and struggle into one of acceptance and grace. Compassion doesn't remove the pain of transformation, but it fundamentally changes our relationship with that pain. A marvelous paradox is that the more fully you accept the impermanence of your identity, the clearer your true nature becomes. It's like the difference between identifying with specific ocean waves or recognizing yourself as the whole ocean. The waves are constantly changing, arising, growing, and dissipating in an endless flow. The ocean remains. When you stop clinging rigidly to the waves of your life, specific roles, relationships, status, possessions, beliefs, you begin to feel the tranquil vastness of the ocean that is your deepest nature. Stories of transformation are inscribed in our most ancient traditions. The heroes and heroines of the myths don't achieve their greatness by avoiding symbolic death, but by passing directly through it. They descend into the underworld, face their deepest fears, lose everything they thought they were, and only then emerge reborn, bringing gifts into their world. Your life is no different. The periods when you feel you are losing yourself are potentially the most sacred. They are the portals to a more authentic and powerful expression of who you really are. One revelation that often emerges during periods of profound transformation is the realization that you were never really separate from the greater whole of life. The boundaries that seemed so solid, between you and others, between your inner life and the outside world, between the human and the natural, begin to reveal their porosity. This sense of interconnectedness is not just an abstract idea, but a lived experience. And with it comes a deep sense of relief. You realize that you don't have to carry the weight of being a totally separate and self-sufficient me. You are sustained by a web of life much larger than your individual identity. Perhaps the most precious gift of identity transitions is the expanded capacity to live with mystery. When you go through the experience of letting go of who you thought you were without clearly knowing who you are becoming, you develop a tolerance for the unknown. And in this space of not knowing, something marvelous can happen. You begin to feel a genuine curiosity about your own life. Instead of trying to rigidly control your story or fulfill predetermined expectations, you become an open explorer, sincerely asking, who am I really? What is wanting to emerge through me now? What greater purpose might this transformation be preparing me for? There is a special kind of joy that arises not in spite of difficult transformations, but because of them. It's a deeper and more substantial joy than mere pleasure or entertainment. It is the joy of growth, of expansion, of conscious participation in the dance of life. This joy can coexist with the sadness of loss, with the anxiety of the unknown, with the confusion of identity and transition. It is not a denial of these experiences, but a realization that they are also part of a life fully lived. It is the joy of saying yes to the whole human experience, including the uncomfortable and challenging parts. Your ancestors went through countless cycles of death and rebirth so that you could be here today. Think of the transformations your parents, grandparents, and more distant ancestors had to embrace. Identities they had to abandon. Beliefs they had to question. Losses they had to accept. New beginnings that they had to create, often in circumstances much more challenging than their own. Your own capacity for transformation is an ancestral inheritance, inscribed in both your biological and spiritual DNA. When you allow parts of you to die to make way for others, you are honoring that lineage of adaptability and resilience that flows through your veins. And now, as we conclude this exploration, I invite you to consider that this moment, exactly as it is, with all its uncertainties and possibilities, can be perfect. Not perfect in the sense of being free of challenges or confusion, but perfect as a necessary stage in your ongoing unfolding. The parts of you that are dying have completed their sacred task. The parts that are being born bring gifts that are still unfolding. And you, the consciousness that witnesses it all, remain always present, always aware, always able to begin again. Right now, exactly as you are, with everything you're letting go of and everything you're receiving, you are the perfect manifestation of a universe in constant transformation. And that's not just good, it's deeply, sacredly necessary.